So now that we've blocked out the room, we're going to move into the finer details. To begin with, I'm going to go to my materials section, and I'm going to set myself up with some walls. So for the walls, we're going to look around the materials, and you'll see that there's one that is called wall pane interior matte inst. Now this is a material, and all I have to do is hold down left click and drag it onto a surface to apply it. Can do that again, and again, and again. My 4 walls. Next up, I'm going to go from here to start looking at what I'm going to do with the roof. Actually, you know what? Let's do the roof as well. That's a nice white. And I'm now going to go delete the search term I had, which was wall, and instead I'm going to do a quick search for floor. You see that one of them is wood floor matte inst. So I'm just going to connect that to here. Don't worry about the outside, we'll fix that up later. And we've now got ourselves a nice floor and some walls. So if we wanted this to look like a real space, the quickest way for us to kind of start doing that is going to be, well, to kind of make it a little bit messier. So what I mean by that is, let's actually get these 4 walls and start carving them out a little bit, because how often do you actually have 4 perfectly square walls inside of your room? Typically you're actually going to have like little things carving in because there's closet space somewhere, or there's going to be a staircase behind it that's forced a wall to be pushed in, or a chimney perhaps, etc, etc. So I'm going to start carving out my space in a slightly more interesting way, and you can do this however you want to, but feel free to follow along with how I'm doing it, so that you've got something to kind of compare it to. This initial space, I'm going to go back to my geometry tools, my geometry placement, and I'm going to drop in a box over here. Now, because I had the floor selected as my last my last material, it's going to go ahead and apply that to the box that I dropped in. I kind of don't want that. I'm going to set it to be the pane interior instead, and I'm going to go ahead and drop this in, at which point I'm going to start working out how best to have this fitted. My gut says something that's very nice and snug against the wall, probably even more snug than what I'm seeing right there. Probably when I go to this, I'm going to go to a 10 centimeter snapped grid, and I'm just going to pull this in until we're about 20 centimeters from the wall itself. I'm also going to run that all the way up to the roof. And I'm thinking I'll run it to the side further. I might just place it like this. So we kind of have it sticking out like that. I'm going to move this television. This means that I could theoretically have like a painting or something sitting there. I could have a nice lamp sitting over here, and potentially like a table in front of this. So I think that's going to come along all right. So I'm going to go from there, and I'm going to add that painting because I really like the idea of it. So this is going to sit around here. Yeah, that'll look alright when I'm done. Cool. I'm also going to have like a standing lamp sitting in the corner. Keep in mind that all of our lighting is currently temporary. We're going to be adjusting it as we go. Put a pop lamp in there for good measure. It's a good idea whenever you add something like a pop lamp to go ahead and add a second one somewhere, because typically these things kind of come in twos. Gonna grab my lamp and follow my own advice. So I'll drag. Probably be nice to have another one of these somewhere over in the corner, but I feel like this is another one of those things that we could probably make a little bit messier. So I'm gonna go ahead and add another wall along here. So I'm just gonna select this one and just drag it across because I know it's the correct size. And something like that would probably do reasonably well. I'm going to connect this all the way over to the wall. Oops, I wasn't in geometry mode. Going to run this all the way over to the wall. So we've got something nice. Adding a little bit of disruption to the room. Looks okay. Then going to get my shelving. Drag this in. I'm just going to quickly add some bookcases along the wall here. Something that, you know, as you walked in, you would see. I'm going to alt drag, so we've got two of these next to each other. Make it look like a larger case. Now here's one of the first things you'll find when it comes to modeling. Quite often you don't have a model, but you do have something very similar to what you want. So for instance, I have this bookcase, but if I turn it sideways, I have a TV stand. Doesn't matter that it's under the ground. No one's ever going to know. No one's ever going to see. This can be our little secret. I'm also going to move these across a bit because they're now not in the best alignment with the rest of my room. Yeah, that looks okay. I've got a fair bit of space over here on this side, actually. I'll figure that out in a bit. So I've got that going on. I've got a nice lamp over there. And I'm going to go ahead and add like a rug underneath this lamp. So carpet. So I'm just going to drag this until we get into a position that's quite nice. I think it might even look better to have it a little further that way. You know, it's at times like this that I actually almost feel like my room is still too big. So again, I'm just going to eyeball this stuff. So as long as you're kind of vaguely close to what I'm doing, then we're all good. I'm going to set this to be a 100 centimeter snap grid, and I'm just going to go into wireframe mode and kind of just pull everything in by 2 meters or 1 meter in. So I'm going to grab this entire wall, just move it across a meter. This mesh across a meter. This mesh. And the good news is you know, I can do this now, and if I was building off of an actual plan, this wouldn't matter quite as much. There we go. It's a bit more snug. Yeah, I like that more. So I'm going to go out of geometry mode. I'm going to set my snap grid to be a little smaller so it's easy to place things around the world. Yep, that's good. So again, I'm just going to keep going through and just adding general clutter. I know a lot of this stuff seems kind of boring, but it's a good idea to know how to do it. So again, that went too high initially, but by pressing the end key, it fell down onto the floor and got to the correct size for something that would, you know, be sitting along there. I'm gonna go ahead and just, okay, so if I look at this painting, I'm gonna drag this in. You'll see that it's called M Painting 1. Sorry, M Frame 1 with the material M Painting 1. And if I click on Painting 1, there's actually a bunch of different paintings that I can swap this out with. So in this instance, I'm going to go with something like this one. And I'm going to set it to be scaled up. Now before I showed you this tool, but I didn't really go into it too much. If I go to my scale widget by hitting space, or I can select it from up here, I'm able to actually click and resize the object. Now at the moment, I've made a bit of a mistake that I'm not actually 90 degrees. I thought I was, but I was negative 100 instead of negative 90. So I just typed it in manually there. I could have used the rotation widget, but I wanted to be sure. So I'm now able to kind of get this put it up here as like a big painting of some sort. I might change these numbers to be straight 2, 1, 2. Now this scales it on different axes. So if I set this to 5, it's going to stretch out to be 5 times the length going that way as to it normally is. If I set this one to 5, it's going to be 5 times the size upwards as it normally is. So I've gone 2, but I've kept the y-axis as a 1. And the reason for that is that I still want the frame to be pretty thin, which gives us this effect. So I'm going to set this to a 10 centimeter snap grid and just snap it against the wall somewhere. So again, I'm going to keep going through and just drag stuff out, set up a very basic environment. And it's about time that I kind of went and added, thinking some little stands next to the couch could look nice, just something that you'd put a remote on that's when the table just seems too far away. Life's tough. So I'm going to drag this in, and on a whim, I'm going to set it to 0.75, 0.75. Okay, I'll keep that as 1. Now the reason I've set it up like this is I want it to kind of be thinner, and I'm sure many of you are groaning at how I'm using these assets, but it's okay. I'm going to drag this to either side. I got a bit of this happening. Looks right. And we can go off and we can put a lamp on top of it. Nice. That lamp's probably a bit too big though, so I'm going to set this lamp to be 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Now, one thing that's worth noting is this little lock key. So if this lock is checked, when I scale something up, it scales all of the axes at the same time. So see how those numbers are all changing together? But if it's unlocked, I can rescale it on only one axis, which is also very useful. In this case, 0.5 is fine. I'm going to lift it up, hit end, so that it drops down onto the floor. And I'm going to copy it over to here. I have one on either side of the table. Now get ourselves some lamps. I kind of want to add another rug, so I'm going to click on this rug, and Alt drag it across. And I'm going to shrink it down a little bit to about 0.75, just so we've got a little bit of differentiation. Also going to rotate it so no one ever notices it's the same rug. Cool. I think finally I'm just going to quickly add some other paintings and then we'll move on to the more interesting stuff. So I'm going to shrink this down. And again, as I showed you before, I can set this to be, maybe it's a little big, maybe a little small. Yep, and I can set this to be a different painting, because we have all sorts of different things there. So that seems good. Got some basics of the room going on. I could really use some curtains. So I've dragged in the curtains, and the curtains are currently extending all the way from the roof. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this section here, and I'm just going to shrink them until they're the correct size to, oops, that was way too small. Shrink them so they're the correct size to kind of align with my doorway here. So 0.8 seemed to be my magic number. Actually, I might pull it in so they kind of, no, I'm just going to go smaller grid. Going to need to move it a couple of centimeters out so that we're not clipping with anything. There we go. And I'm going to Alt. Now, before I do this, I actually want this to be flipped because I want this corner to be in this side of it. And the reason I want that is so if I was to click on this one, for instance, and I was to extend it along this axis, it's actually going to stretch out to cover the entire doorway. Do you see that? So I want the same thing for this one. So to do that, I can right click, transform, and just say mirror along that axis, at which point it perfectly mirrors it for us, which is nice. So that's our nice little curtain area set up. Now, the only other things, I mean, obviously we need to do a higher decoration pass on this, but this is going to be our basic blocking out for our room. The other thing I might do just quickly is I'm going to throw a mess along this ground here to make it look like a little kid's been playing around. So I could manually go through and just place these blocks into the map. So see, I just drag it in and then groan about my life as I do so. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the foliage tool. So see this tool up here? If I click on that and I drag these blocks into the foliage tool, what I actually have the ability to do now is, if I zoom out, you can see that the entire world I have a massive circular cursor around it. I'm going to use the square brackets on my keyboard to shrink this down a bit. And you'll see that I'm now greeted with a nice little brush size about this big. Now, if I hold down left click, this actually lets me kind of paint these into the world. Now this is meant to be used for grass and general foliage, but you can really use it in any way that you want to. In this case, it's particularly good for just laying out small objects, like blocks. And if I want to, on any of these, I can actually change things like the radius, the density, so if I crank this number up and then paint, probably going to crash my editor, and I should have thought about that before doing it. Oh, yep, there we go. You can see that it added a ridiculous number. P.S. Don't do what I just did. I'm going to hit Control Z. But as I increase the density, it's going to increase the number of them in an area. I can also use the Shift left click to remove them. So if I look at this and I'm like, oh, my mess should really be over here and away from the area there, I can do so. Again, add a couple of rogue blocks over there, so it looks like this kid that was fooling around has managed to spread their mess all around the room. If some of your blocks are clipping, you can always click on this button here, at which point you can grab any singular block and kind of move it around a little bit, put it somewhere that you think's nice. I want to cast a little shadow from it. And that seems like it'll be okay. Yeah, that'll probably do for my general clutter and mess. And it's at this point that I'm going to leave everyone to be, and I want you to just add some mess to this. Actually, one last thing before we do is I'm going to get this wall over here. I'm going to go back to my place mode. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make this wall a brick wall. So under content materials, I'm going to tap on the word brick. And I'm just going to set it to this brick blue. The reason for that is I'm going to set this up to be kind of like a general feature wall. So I want you to go through and add your own details. If you're trying to figure out what to do, a good idea is to add books to the room. So you could add all sorts of just like general books to the shelves here. You could add some mugs on the surface, etc., etc. So we'll meet back in just a little bit, and we'll start with our meshed out room. We'll start looking at how to do some lighting.